Good stuff right there. And let's be honest, there are a lot of ladies in this crowd that probably know more football than some of the guys sitting in this room. So I'll kill that stereotype real quick. And that last part, the rage part, that's actually a reenactment of Pastor Carter after every Vikings game. It's not at all. Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome. My name is Danny. I am the Ocean Beach campus director. Last service, I said I was the TR Sandy campus director, and that didn't go over well. So I made sure I got it right this time. I spent 6 years there. It happens, right? But I'm glad that you guys are here with us this morning. I want to say hello to everybody watching us on Facebook today and out on the patio in Mom's room. We're glad that you guys are here with us. So it's Super Bowl Sunday. And let's be honest, it's not necessarily about the teams. It's, are they going to have good nachos or are they going to have good hot wings, right? Because that's why we gather at Super Bowl. Some of you want to watch the team and the game and whatever, but a lot of us want to watch the commercials and want to eat the food. That's why we're there, right? Man, you guys are like, you got to give me something here. And no, I'm not a Miami Dolphins fan. Some of you guys will get the back of this jersey for a reason. Laces out is all I have to say. But maybe the Super Bowl is not your thing, but the party is what you're all about. In fact, this really speaks to your view of the Super Bowl right here. I've been training all football season to eat at a Super Bowl party level. Stretching that stomach up, getting ready. Or maybe this is you. Let's barely watch the Super Bowl together. These are the people that sit in the kitchen the entire time. You're like, hey, it's a game. Do you know any? Oh, I didn't know that was going on. Or maybe this is you right here. Just a heads up that I'll need to leave your Super Bowl party early because I don't like to clean up. Now, if you don't know who that person is, that might be you. And I'm sorry if that's you. No, actually, that's me. So anyways, whatever it is, wherever you're at with the Super Bowl, the one thing that I absolutely love about the Super Bowl is that it's this opportunity for us as people to gather and celebrate. And one of the things that I think we need to celebrate is this right here, that there are no Patriots in the Super Bowl this year. That's a big win right there. Tom Brady doesn't get another chance this year. Hey, that's right. You guys cheered on that one. At least somebody cheered, right? No. But seriously, one of my absolute favorite things about the Super Bowl is that it still shows as people, as who we are, we still want to gather together. We still want to get together. We still want to eat together. We still want to celebrate. We still want to, even for some of our teams, cry or whatever it is or lament about it. But the Super Bowl still shows me that as people, we desire to be together. We want to be together in community. And it's this truth right here that I believe. It's that God wired all of us, everybody, his entire creation. He wired us for connectedness. Now, Paul, the Apostle Paul, if you don't know who Paul is, Paul was like this missionary, great church planner. Most of the New Testament he wrote, it's these letters to different churches. Ephesians is a letter he wrote to a church. And what this verse does for me really is it really gives us a beautiful picture of what the church can be. And it says this: he makes the whole body fit together perfectly, as each part does its own special work. It helps the other parts grow so that the whole body is healthy and growing and full of love. To me, that's like the picture of the church. That's what I would love for us to be as a church. In fact, I think we're getting there. I think we really are. I look what's going on right now, and I look at all the different wins and the cool stuff that we're celebrating. And really, this is what we're starting to live out. And it's amazing to see, but it's something that we're constantly growing into because we're always fighting against this isolation or not doing life together, and we're always fighting against anything that causes us not to love one another. So it's a constant battle to live out this verse as a church, as people in relationships. In fact, today we're kicking off this brand new series called Cultivate. And Cultivate is a 4-week series all about how to have healthy relationships. Because we can look at our life and we can look at all the different relationships that we have, and some of them, yes, are healthy, but there are also the other side, the relationships that can be unhealthy, or they can be toxic, or maybe there's even relationships that you've experienced betrayal or trauma or something like that. And when we think about relationships, the one thing that I know is very truthful about relationships is that they're messy, because as people, we're messy. Throughout this series, we're going to be chasing after this question right here. How do we, as people, as individuals, as the church, how do we intentionally cultivate relationships that improve the quality and the direction in our lives? How do we nurture? How do we take care of? How do we grow these loving relationships like we see Paul talk about in Ephesians? How do we have those type of relationships? And when I think of cultivating, that's work. You're like cultivating, you're growing, you're caring for, you're nurturing. That takes work. So what I see here is, how do I actually do the work to have healthy relationships in my life? The ones that push me forward. And I think about this, like when we think of relationships, we care for relationships. In fact, I would say even put some tension on that question, because relationships absolutely matter. And think of it like this. If your relationship at home, say you're married, if your relationship at home isn't good, you're probably not good. What's the old saying? Happy wife, happy life, right? We have that on a wood little thing in our kitchen, and me and the 3 boys that I have, sometimes 4 with me, constantly look at that and are reminded that it's about maintaining healthy relationships. Think about your own life. If your work relationship is like with other people, or your boss isn't going well, how well is your job going? It's usually going pretty bad because you're stressing, right? Or maybe you're a student and you've been fighting with your roommate for like ever, and you're like, good night, I can never get along with this person. And you're avoiding going to your room until late at night because you can't stand the other person. How's your life going? How's school going? How's studying going? Because that's stressful. The person you live with, you can't get along with. That's tough. But we can look at all of our relationships and realize that. Relationships are like core and essential to us as people. And when relationships are going well, things usually seem to be going okay. Our relationships in a lot of ways can make and break who we are. And I know that when it comes to them, we care for them. And I would say when it comes to you, there's things in your life that you care about. In fact, you take care of them. I would say like everybody takes care of one of these, right? We can't go anywhere without these silly things. Like you charge it at night. You want to make sure you don't drop it, because to get the glass replaced is ridiculous. And like we take care of those. Or our cars, we take care of our cars. Like we need to put gas in them. We need to wash them. We need to make sure they're taken care of. There's all kinds of things that we love that we can't imagine doing life without sometimes, that we take care of. They're kind of like a fuel for us a little bit. You feel like, yeah, I've got this, and I feel like I have what I need for the day. But what if we looked at people and relationships as fuel? And think of it like this. You have those people in your life that when your tank is empty, you're out of gas, that you can go to, that literally fill you up. In fact, when I say that, that person may even come to mind right now. Like, there's those people that when you have nothing left and you're like, man, I need something in my life, and then you call this person, and instantly you're like, man, I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful for that person. I love the way Jesus says it. And he gives us this description on how relationships can work, what they can look like. And he says this. He says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength. That's everything you've got. The second is this: love your neighbor as yourself. There is no commandment greater than these. That's what relationships look like. When you think about it, if I'm going to love somebody like I love myself, that means the good, the bad, the ugly, and everything in between. Like, I care for myself. I love myself. I grow. I don't want to have those ugly things that maybe are hidden or whatever they are. It's why I'm in a men's group. It's why I have people in my life that'll speak truth. But it's because I love those people like I love myself. And I have to be willing to love their good, bad, ugly, and everything in between. I want to look at 3 truths today on how we can begin or take those steps or continue to really grow those relationships in our life, those healthy relationships in our life. And the first point is this: if we're going to learn how to have what Jesus is saying here, these loving our friends like we love ourselves, we actually have to prioritize that. We have to prioritize God's design for relational living. We live in a world right now where it's so easy to disconnect with people, but yet think we have a lot of relationships. Social media, right? I have an author, his name's Donald Whitney, a guy who writes spiritual discipline stuff. He says, "We're the most technologically advanced society to date, but we are the most relationally inept to exist." We can have 500 friends on Facebook and maybe even just know about 10 of them or 20 of them. I mean, how many of your friends on Instagram can you say you actually know? I remember I worked for this church in Nashville. It was a pretty popular church, and a lot of the guys that were on staff had written books and were speakers and stuff. But I was coming from a church out here in California, and I moved my family out there. And I was on Twitter back then. This is a long time ago. So I think I had like 25 followers in California. I moved to Nashville. I'm on staff there for 3 months, and I have over 1,200 followers on my Twitter account. But I only knew 25 of them, the original 25 that I had come back with. But I felt so good because I was like, look at all these people I know, but I didn't really know them. I'll say this. What we value, who we value, is actually who gets the time in our lives. Is actually what gets the time. It's what gets our most face time. It gets the very best of us. And in your life right now, what's getting the best of you? Who's getting the best of you? Is anybody that you have relationships with, that you do life with, actually getting the best of you? Or are they getting just this kind of surface level of who you are? See, there's this persona that we can take on when we choose isolation, because isolation is a choice just as much as community and relationships are a choice. It's this Lone Ranger type of idea. That's the flip side of not prioritizing God's way of doing life. It's kind of what culture and society tells us, you go at it alone. No, you don't need nobody. You've got all you. You're enough. In fact, there's like this idea that we're to be these strong individuals. And yes, we are, but we need people in our life. God said it from the very beginning. The Lord God said, if it is not good for the man to be alone. And I can say that, man and woman, all of us. It's not good for us to be alone. God made the first relationship right here. I will make a helper suitable for him. What that shows me is God has put us together. We desire to be in community. Guys, I'm gonna call us out real quick because I know this Lone Ranger, this Rambo type of deal, I can get on it. In fact, I can kind of get like this right here, that self-made type of persona, where this is all, I did this on my own. I didn't need nobody. I just needed me. I needed me and nobody else. And I can kind of be that Lone Ranger all out by myself trying to do this. And you know what happens every time I do that? I get taken out. It's hard because sometimes, man, maybe we've tried relationships and we've tried to do life with other people and like really tried to be loving, and all we did was get hurt. And now we're defensive, right? We've experienced trauma or betrayal or whatever it is, and now we're just tucked up like this. And like thinking about doing relationships is hard. So as guys, we isolate. I'm going to charge this by myself. I always say this, I may know a lot of people, but does anyone really know me? I have a friend of mine that says that. And I love watching him grow as he continues to work through that. Guys, I want to say this. If you're out there and you're doing this thing called life on your own, I want to invite you to get to know some of the guys at this church. At the end of the month, on February 29th at 8 to 10 a.m., we're going to be having a men's breakfast here. It's a great opportunity, guys, to get to meet some of the other people around, other guys around here. It's a great opportunity to find maybe a life group if you haven't been connected into a life group. It's a great opportunity just to come. I would just say this. You may not be in a situation where you're like, I don't know if I have time for a life group. I don't know how I have enough time for relationships. I would say just come. Just come and experience it. We're talking about tri-tip and eggs. And that's not a bad Saturday morning, right? Come on out for that. That's like a good one right there. Like, I'll just come for the steak and eggs and bounce. But I guarantee you this, guys, it's going to be a great morning. There are going to be really solid guys there that are just looking to do life together. That's it. And dads, I'll say this. This is a really good opportunity to bring your sons to as well. I only love doing men's events when not only is it great guys getting together, but a chance for dads to learn how to be dads and sons to see their dads growing, being vulnerable, being willing to say as a dad, hey, I'm kind of broken and I need some other people in my life. And I would say this is the event for you to come to. Don't miss it. This idea of being self-made is this persona that we think we have to hold up. But a persona is nothing more than a false presentation of a character we're trying to live out. And the problem with that is it gets tiring and it gets old because these personas aren't real. They're imaginations of what we think we are. And guys, we're not the only ones. Ladies, I know you out there can kind of assume this. I'm the strong mom. I'm the strong woman. I don't need other women in my life. They're too much drama around me, and I'm going to do this on my own. You know why I know that? Because I'm married to one, and she will do the same thing. And she told me as I was talking to her about this, I said, hey, I was talking about the guys. She's the one she's like, no, you need to call out the ladies too because we do the same thing. We have too much stuff going on, and we're like, I just don't have time for other people. I don't have time for relationships. And she looks at me and she goes, yeah, I know. Sometimes you're just enough. And I get what she was saying there. But it's hard. And ladies, Pastor Carter talked about it. It's the if gathering. Same thing. It's an opportunity for you ladies to get together and get to know some of the women that call this place home, that are in all seasons of life. They've been a Christian for one day or they've been a Christian for 20 years. And there's so many women that are at this thing that have gone through every season of life. They have been there with two littles in diapers and you literally wanting to pull your hair out. I watched my wife do it with three of them. We have 3 kids. They're crazy. One of them's in the booth right now. There he is waving. I love that kid. Sometimes. No, I'm just kidding. But ladies, put this as a priority. This is such an amazing opportunity for you really, really to get connected to some of the women that call this place home. There's a quote from this guy. His name is Nate Larkin. We're studying his book in my men's group. It's called Samson and the Pirate Monks. Now, that's just a rad name for a book. Why not read it, right? But he says this when it comes to personas. He says, that's the biggest problem with personas. A false self can never rest. It looks like a real person, but a persona is actually just a hologram, a projected image, and it requires constant energy to keep that image up. Anybody that's tried to live up a persona, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I remember when I was in my 20s, I was in the Coast Guard, and I was doing a lot of really fun stuff, and I thought I was just like the guy, right? And I always tried to put off this image like I was the guy, but all the time inside, I would never admit that when we went and did some of the stuff that we did, I was scared, like super scared, because we did some gnarly stuff in the Caribbean. I was stationed in Miami, and we did some really gnarly stuff down there, and I remember I would try to be like such a tough guy. Yeah, we're going to do it. And I remember I was scared the entire time. Mainly behind our personas, that's what really it is that we're either scared or intimidated, whatever it is. But this is the thing he says at the end, and this is like the reality check when it comes to personas. He says, a persona is afraid to go to sleep because to sleep is to die. we as people try to live this life on our own. We try to put off these personas like we've got it all together. And listen, I know I fall into that trap. In fact, I know when it comes to my persona, it's like, yeah, I got this all together, but I can co-sign my own nonsense in about 2.5 seconds. One of the reasons I can do that is because I'm out front being this Lone Ranger and I don't have a voice of truth telling me otherwise. That's why we have these events. That's why we do life groups. It's why we fully believe that God wired us to be in community together. See, in those weak times, in those times where we absolutely need people, because I always say isolation leads to insanity because we start believing the lies in our head and it destroys us. Like when we put our head on the pillow at night, all the things we did wrong, those tapes start playing. And before we get out of bed in the morning and put our foot on the floor, we've already destroyed ourselves and told ourselves how good we aren't and how bad we actually are. Isolation to me always leads to insanity. But when I lean into relationships, when I trust the people that God put in my life, when I lean into those relationships as fuel because my tank runs empty so much, it can empower and encourage us. God puts people in our life for a reason. Some of the people, yes, they can be relationships that literally suck the fuel right out of our tank. We can be around them for less than a minute and we're like, gosh, man, I wish that I didn't have to have this person in my life. But maybe they're coming to you because they need your fuel. Sometimes we have to see that. Now, there are relationships we actually absolutely have to have titanium boundaries with and give no fuel to because they are toxic, because there has been trauma, there has been betrayal. But the relationships I'm talking about here are the ones that when the bottom falls out and you're like, man, I need help. I need somebody. You can go to those people and they'll fill your tank and you can get that empowerment and that encouragement that you're looking for. No matter any situation you might be facing, you can lean into those relationships and really trust that those people are the ones that can give you that encouragement that you need. Today, we're going to be looking at a relationship just like this in the book of 2 Corinthians. 2 Corinthians was written by Paul, which was a letter to the church, like I had said earlier. But where we're picking up is Paul and Silas. Silas was like one of his roadmates, one of his ride or die friends. Like these guys were out. They were on mission. They were in Macedonia, and they were preaching the gospel, telling things about Jesus, and they weren't digging it in Macedonia at all. They weren't digging it at all. So they strip them of their clothing, they mock them, they beat them, and they throw them in prison. Paul and Silas. And this is exactly where we pick up in verse 5. Paul says this, "For when we came into Macedonia, we had no rest, but we were harassed at every turn. Conflicts on the outside, fears within." Paul's being really vulnerable here. He's admitting that things are hard. He's saying, man, my tank is empty. It's been a hard run here in Macedonia. He's like, we're in prison. I got beat up again. I'm in prison again. I've been mocked again. And he's being vulnerable here. But there's two words coming up. And Pastor Carter mentioned these last week. And him and I talk about that. We've been talking about these two words for a while now, and I wish I could get something to put them on the wall for us. That'd be really cool. It says this, and this is Paul, those two words. He says, but God. But God. No matter what situation you're facing, no matter where you may be in life, no matter what's going on, you may be downcast, you may be in your own prison, getting your own, whatever's going on in your life, but God. But God has a way that he shows up. The problem is when we're in situations like this and our tank is empty, it's anything but God sometimes. Always remember, but God will. But God will show up. And look at how he does this with Paul and Silas. But God, who confronts the downcast, or comforts the downcast, comforted us by the coming of Titus. Here's that relationship Here comes the fuel tank. Here comes like that fuel barge. Comforted us by the coming of Titus. And not only by his coming, but also by the comfort you had given him. Now he's talking about the church in Corinth, because this letter was written to the Corinthian believers. Now he's addressing them, and the church in Corinth is like one of his first church. There was an established church. It was a strong church. They were like OGs. They were original gatherers. You like what I did right there? Boom. Don't forget that one right there. There's some of you in this room that are OGs, original gatherers for this church. He says this. He says, by the coming of Titus, and not only by his coming, but also the comfort you have given him. He's carrying a message. He's got the fuel that they need. And here's the fuel. He told us about your longing for me, your deep sorrow, your concern for me, so that my joy was greater than ever. The tank, the hose is in, and the tank is filling. And he's like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. He's telling them, like, guys, thank you so much for getting it and staying with me and partnering with me and praying for me and being sorrow and being sad for our situation, but yet at the same time praying. And he's just pouring out. He says, by all this, and he's talking about him and Silas, Paul and Silas. By all this, we were encouraged. In addition to our own encouragement, we were especially delighted to see how happy Titus was, because his spirit has been refreshed by you all. He was fuel. Titus took that energy and that fuel and brought it to Paul and Silas. That's a beautiful, beautiful situation of what a relationship looks like. See, what I see here is that God used Titus, a person, to be the source of Paul's comfort. He was the fuel for Paul and Silas's empty tank. And God could have used an angel to speak to Paul in that moment, but he didn't. He used Titus. He used a human. He used a person. He used a relationship. And I know there's been situations probably in your life where you've been like, man, I know who my Titus was. I know who that Titus was that showed up that day when I got that news or that diagnosis or I got that email or I got that phone call or whatever it was. Or maybe you need to be asked that question. Who is your Titus? Do you have a person like that in your life? If you don't, you need to find one. And I don't mean to push these events, but man, that's the place to be. That's the place to be. Because I'll tell you this, God often meets our needs through relationships. I think of some of the stuff that happens in small groups, like when there's somebody in the hospital or somebody has had a baby, food shows up. People pray. People start calling. He begins to meet the needs through relationships. It's this, and Paul reminds us. He says, but God, who comforts the downcast, comforted us by the coming of Titus, meeting it through a relationship. And man, I think of some of like the relationships I've had in my life, some of the strong relationships where I've had those people in my life that have been that fuel that I've needed because of whatever season I in was draining and it was tough. I think of Pastor Carter. I didn't know 6 years ago when I came on staff, he was right there before me, that I would actually end up working at this campus. I was in Tirisana for 6 years. And in a moment where we needed to talk, here I am. He met my need through a relationship. But when I was in Nashville, I had this opportunity, what I thought was an opportunity. I had just gotten there. I'd been on staff for like a month or so, and a buddy of mine, he was my campus pastor. Him and I are really close friends still. He called me in the office. He's like, hey, man, I got this really amazing opportunity for you. I was like, sweet, what is it? He's like, I got this group of men that I've been leading for a couple years, and I can't lead that group this season. I need you to lead the group. And he goes, I want you to understand, these are phenomenal guys. These guys are like stellar dudes and will do anything for you. And I was like really built up. He's like, man, it's like these guys will love you. They'll take care of you. Da, da, da. He builds this group up like huge. It was like basically the greatest thing I've ever heard in my entire life. That's what I was about to go join. But it came with this caveat. after I said yes. I said, yeah, absolutely. He goes, okay, Tuesday morning, 6:30, you're in charge. A.M., not P.M. Military guys are like, that's late, man, like 6:30. No, 6:30 a.m. is early. I don't do 6:30 very often. And I was mad. I was like, dude, why didn't you tell me it's 6:30? I'd have told you no way. Here's the deal. It was in the wintertime. And in the wintertime in Nashville for a few weeks, it gets below zero. And I'm from Southern California, and I don't know what to do with 0-degree weather. I remember the first time it was zero out, I fumbled, I'm sorry. I went outside, and I went to go open my door, and I couldn't. And I thought my door was broken. I called my buddy. I said, hey, man, my door's broken. And he goes, no, dummy, it's frozen shut. He was like, this is why I didn't want to lead that group, dude. But in that group, I met a really phenomenal guy. His name was Chase. And Chase and I are still really great friends. I love Chase to death. And Chase showed up to our group probably about a month after we started. And Chase was not the person that I know who he is today. Chase showed up and he was in bad shape. And he tells everybody, he goes, I was a drunken womanizer when I showed up. And I was facing all kinds of heat, man. Young guy, he'd recently passed the bar. He was a lawyer. He had passed the bar about a year and gained a lot of success, a lot of success, a lot of notoriety. Huge lawyer in Nashville. He was doing immigration stuff and just well-known, well-loved. And he showed up as this empty, hollow person. And for a year and a half, I walked with Chase. I just hung out with Chase. I ate lunch with Chase. I drank coffee with Chase. I went to sporting events with Chase. I talked on the phone for countless hours with Chase. I loved this guy. He was like one of my closest friends, still is. And I remember the day, it was after group, that I walked outside in front of the church. I had just resigned, and nobody knew. And I grabbed Chase, and I said, hey, man, I got to tell you something. He goes, oh, okay. He goes, it looks serious. What's up, man? And I said, I resigned yesterday, and we're going back to California. And I literally felt like I saw this man drop. And he looked at me, and he goes, no, that's not going to happen. Like, you can't leave. I said, I'm sorry, bro. My most important relationship right now, my family is hurting, and we need to go home. And he goes, Danny, he goes, I don't think I've ever told you this. And I go, what's that, buddy? He goes, God has used you to be such a source of encouragement and belief in me. He goes, everybody has believed in party Chase, crazy Chase, the one that's got money and wants to like make it rain all the time. That's who people loved. He said, you look past that and you got to know who I really was. He goes, man, what am I going to do? And I said, Chase, because getting to know him, he's one of those guys, I was like, man, this guy needs to go in full-time vocational ministry. This guy needs to be a pastor. This guy's phenomenal. Grew up in the church. He's from deep South Alabama. Crazy, like Roll Tide Alabama type guy. That was him. And I remember I looked at him. I said, Chase, here's what you need to do. You need to get involved. You need to take that next step. I believe in you. I know that God has something for you. And I love getting calls from Chase now. Because Chase will call me and go, hey, man, what are you doing? I said, I'm just hanging, man. He's like, hey, I'm in Peru, baby. He's a missionary now. And that's what he does. He's with the International Mission Board, and he travels all over the world and shares the gospel and does, like, amazing things. He'll call me up, man, I'm in Peru. This place is nuts. I love it, baby. And he's this crazy dude. I love Chase to death. But guys, there are seasons in relationships with people where, yes, they are the people that we need, but at the same time, we have to be the people that they need. I didn't know that. In fact, Chase didn't know that he probably made a greater impact in my life than I believe I made in his. He continues to make this huge impact. Now, other people in his life and other people are doing relationship, because when it comes to relationships, it's not about being a part of the beginning and the end and everything in between, because sometimes in relationships, we're part of the beginning and not the end, or just a part of the middle. It's all a journey, and we need to be okay with that. But we need to need to understand that God may meet our needs through relationships, And what we experience in those relationships is this encouragement and empowerment, and just get to see what life really looks like and know we have solid people in our life. We have those Tituses. And here's the thing that I know about relationships with encouragement. Encouragement is contagious. It is absolutely contagious. Paul says it. By this, we are encouraged. He says that they were especially delighted and that they were refreshed. This is Titus bringing a message from the Corinthians to Paul and Silas. That encouragement was so contagious that they were filled up. And we read that even Titus, he was like, man, he was overwhelmed with this joy. And there was just this contagiousness in this encouragement. And when I think about us as a church, I think this is true for us. What I'm seeing that's going around on the campus right now is amazing. I see you guys. I watch you guys on service, after service on the patio. You guys are praying for each other. You guys are exchanging phone numbers, getting to know each other. We have 22 life groups, and 90% of you are connected in those life groups. 223 people connected into life groups at this church. That's contagious. I watch it and I hear the stories about what's going on at life groups, what's going on in our serving teams, what's going on outside of these walls. We have a staff meeting every Tuesday at 10 a.m. and we talk about the amazing things that are going on. And it usually takes most of the meeting right now because there's so much going on. Because this statement, encouragement is contagious, is alive within this church. It's alive and it's amazing to watch. And it's even outside of the walls. It's you guys, not only is it contagious here, but it's spreading throughout the community of OV. Last week, we got an award for encouraging. We got an award for throwing the most positive events. That's encouragement that is contagious, that is now spilled over outside of the church into our community. That's what we're known for. Isn't that amazing? Being known as a church that throws events like what we're doing right after service with a bounce house and a shaved ice. We put that on the Facebook page and people are coming. It's because it's contagious and people want to be a part of it. People want those type of relationships. And I'll say this when it comes to encouragement. In order to be encouraged, in order to be supported, people actually have to know what to encourage you for. They have to know what they're supporting. They have to know what they're praying. And that requires something from us. And this is the last truth when it comes to relationships. What they have to know is that we're willing to be real. That we're willing to be vulnerable. And when it comes to you and relationships, we have to embrace vulnerability as the on-ramp, the beginning on-ramp to authentic relationships. Without vulnerability, there's no authenticity. Without vulnerability, there's just the Sunday mask. Do you know what the Sunday mask is? Did I say that yet? I don't remember. They all kind of blend together. The Sunday mask is this. And parents, you'll completely understand what I'm saying. You're on your way to church and it's a nuclear meltdown in the car. They can't find their shoes. And even though you put them in the car with their shoes on, they can't find the shoes. They're screaming and yelling. This one's looking at this one, and this one doesn't want that one, and looking at this one, but this one is touching that one and that one. And you're just like, stop it! And you're literally going at it, and then you and your wife go at it, and you're at the point where you're like, maybe if I just leave these kids on the side of the road, I won't have to deal with it anymore. I'm kidding. I would never do that with my kids. Maybe. No, I'm just kidding. And you get to church, and it's literally like this nuclear meltdown, but you open the door, and right as you put your foot on the ground, oh, my family, they're so holy. I love them. And you walk around with that image on Sunday. That's not being vulnerable. Now listen, I get that vulnerability is hard. Vulnerability lets people see what's behind the mask. Vulnerability fights the lie that if anybody knew who I really was, they would want nothing to do with me. If this church knew everything about me, they wouldn't let me through those front doors. They would not want me here. Vulnerability breaks that lie. Vulnerability is this. Vulnerability in relationships is this. And this is something fearful, right? Like vulnerability is waking up in the morning and you've got like the hair thing. This beard gets in my mouth. It's really weird. And like dirt, like nasty breath, like stank breath from the night, whatever's going on. You wake up Vulnerability is letting people over because last night was one of the worst nights you ever had. And you have people in your life that'll come over and pray for you and be there for you. And you would do the same thing for them. That's vulnerability. When you're all in the morningness, like bleh, like type of deal, letting people in, that's being vulnerable. Now I get the flip side of it too, though. Vulnerability can be dangerous. Letting people know who we really are can be dangerous. Because, yeah, the fact that we can have this question, well, if I tell people who I really am, who's to say that they won't use it against me? Because people have before. Who's to say that they won't come at me with these things because they've done it before? Or who's to say that they won't gossip with other people about me? I get it. That's the risk we take with vulnerability. But when we have safe, healthy relationships, and we're doing life with safe, healthy people, and we let down those masks and we open up that sense of vulnerability, that's when real, true, authentic relationships really begin to happen. And in here, one of the best things that I can say when it comes to vulnerability within this church is that New Break OB is a place where it's okay not to be okay. And we all need a safe place like that. We all need a place that we can just come and be, even if it's a complete mess. I always have trouble when we talk about the church being the place that, oh, I have to have all my stuff together to come to church. But yet we're coming to church because we're broken and we need healing and we need Jesus. But yet we'll tell, and the church has this bad reputation of, well, the church just expects me to be perfect. Well, no, not here. We're not perfect. In fact, nobody's perfect. And when we gather in circles like this and in rows on the weekend and circles throughout the week, and nobody's perfect. But when we gather like that, chasing after a relationship with Jesus, anything is possible. And everybody is welcome. When I went to Nashville, the pastor there wrote a couple books, and he had started the church. We were there. It was about the 10-year mark that I came on staff. And he started the church to be different than most churches in Nashville. Nashville wasn't like the belt of the Christian world. It was like the belt buckle of the church world. It was like the center point. All the big pastors and writers and songwriters and bloggers and everybody lived in Nashville. It was like this big bubble, fishbowl, I called it. And he was like, man, I don't want to do a church that everybody else is doing. I want to do a church that's for broken people. I want to do a church that's filled with sinners, the people that, like we read Jesus gathered with. I want to do a church like that. I want to do a church where it's okay not to be okay. And this church exploded. When I came on staff, we were the 6th fastest growing church in the nation. It was just exploding because people found community. They found an acceptance. And people were interviewing him. He was writing books, but he wrote this, he said this in this interview, and I love what he says here. And I think what he says here is absolutely true to who we are as a church. So he says this. He says, I wanted to create an environment where it was okay not to be okay. That kind of sums it up. I wanted to create an environment where people didn't feel like they had to have everything together before they came to church. He says, we really believe that life is messy. It's messy for Christians. It's messy for non-Christians. We wanted to create environments where people could bring that mess with them and they didn't have to pretend to be somebody that they weren't. He said, a place where people could be their true self, be accepted, and belong. That's why we do church. That's why we gather. That's why we talk about doing community and relationship right there. It's because we believe that. It's why we do Sundays. It's why I get up in the morning and I'm so excited to be a part of this place is because I know that's true. And I want to be a part of a place where it's okay not to be okay because I don't have it all together sometimes. And my life is messy. And I need to be at a place where I know it's safe and people love me no matter what. It's like my men's group on Tuesday nights. That group right there, we've been going for a couple weeks, and I think that's a safe place. And it's hard for guys to find a safe place for long, just as much as it is for ladies. And I'm always looking because I will assume that Lone Ranger mentality. I'll take it on. And he says, and Paul says it in Philippians, another letter he wrote to a church. He goes, it's good for us to share in troubles with others. Why? Look at this verse in Ecclesiastes. He says this. He says, or in the book of Ecclesiastes, it says this. It says, 2 people are better off than one. And when you think about Scripture, 2 people being better off than one, it started in Genesis, like we had read. God created Eve. They were a partner. Jesus never sent his disciples out singularly. He sent them out 2 by 2. And it says 2 people are better than one, for they can help each other succeed. If one person falls, the other can reach out and help. But someone who falls alone is in real trouble. They have nobody there to help them. That's why we do community. That's why we do relationships. It's why we gather to get to know people. It's why we do a if gathering or a men's breakfast, is because we know that we are much better together than we ever are alone. So let me end with this question. What are the relationships in your life that are exactly what I'm talking about, and you need to celebrate those and continue those relationships? Or where do you need to begin to establish them, to chase after them fully? Is it family? I know for me, that's one of my main focuses. I read that verse in Ecclesiastes and I think, I give everything to what I do as a pastor. I give everything. I love relationships. I love people. I love connecting. It fuels me up. And sometimes when I get home, my tank is empty and I may watch one of my sons fall or my wife fall. But the problem is with me giving and not receiving sometimes or not being available, I don't have an extra hand and I don't have the energy to pick them up. I need to focus on my family. I know that for me. Do you need to do that in your friends? Do you need to do that in your life group? Like actually commit to going every week in your life group? Like really going, not just going like once a month or every once in a while, but really committing this season to be in your life group? Is it your coworkers? Because if we have strong relationships at work, it usually means that we like what we're doing. Or do you need that seasoned voice in your life? Do you need that mentor, that person to speak truth in your life, especially when they see you starting to choose isolation? Let me just say this. Isolation is a choice, just as much as community is a choice. We can continue down the road of chasing after this self-made idea, or we can stop and begin to listen to God and realize it's not about being on our own. It's about being together because we are better together. Let's pray. Father God, we thank you, Lord. We thank you for just a beautiful story of what relationship looks like. How Titus can come with the encouragement and the empowerment to Paul and Silas in a horrible situation and just be there. God, we all need a Titus in our life because there are those times that we experience our own prisons, our own mocking, whatever it is, God, and we need those strong, encouraging voices in our life. We need community and relationships. So that's my prayer for us today, God. That if we have those relationships, that we continue to grow and care and cultivate those relationships. But if not, and we've been a Lone Ranger, a Rambo, all out on our own by ourselves, that God, you would break that away from us. You would release us from that mentality or even kill off that persona and give us the ability to seek relationships, to seek community, and to do life with other people that call this place home. So, Father, we love you and we praise you. And we pray this all in your Son's name. Amen.
You can feel